Well, there, sorry for the shitty video quality. Can't do anything about that due to the lighting, so let me just share screen. If I can get it to actually do something. There we go. No, there we are. So, this. Okay. Let's actually start then. If I can I need to actually find where I was. There we go. So put this here so I can then close it. And there we go. So, of course, now I have to zoom in again because it minimized it. So the first thing we're going to read is The Ghost Eater, a ghost-written story / collaboration, quote-unquote, between Lovecraft and C.M. Eddy Jr. So, okay, that was not supposed to have happened. I had a short accidentally play. Okay, keeping that open, we can start now. So, The Ghost Eater by C.M. Eddy, and mostly Lovecraft. Moon madness, a touch of fever. I wish I could think so. But when I am alone after dark, in the waste places where my wandering takes me, and hear across infinite voids the demon echoes of these screams and snarls, and that detestable crunching of bones, I shudder again at the memory of that eldritch night. I knew less of woodcraft in those days, though the wilderness called just as strongly to me as it does now. Up to that night I had always been careful to employ a guide, but circumstances now suddenly forced me to a trial of my own skill. It was midsummer in Maine, and despite my great need to get from Mayfair to Glendale by the next noon, I could find no person willing to pilot me. Unless I took the long route through Potterwisset, I have no idea how to pronounce that, which would not bring me to my goal in time. There would be dense forests to penetrate. Yet, whenever I asked for a guide, I was met with refusal and evasion. Stranger than I was, it seemed odd that everyone should have such glib excuses. There was too much important business on hand for such a sleepy village, and I knew that the natives were lying. But they all had imperative duties, or said they had, and would do no more than assure me that the trail through the woods was very plain, running due north, and not in the least difficult for a vigorous young fellow. If I started while the morning was still early, they averred, I could get to Glendale by sundown and avoid a night in the open. Even then I suspected nothing. The prospect seemed good, and I resolved to try it alone, let the lazy villagers hang back as they might. Probably I would have tried it even if I had suspected, for youth is stubborn, and from childhood I had only laughed at superstition and old wives' tales. So before the sun was high, I had started off through the trees at a swinging stride, lunch in my hand, Guardian automatic in my pocket, and belt filled with crisp bills of large denominations. From the distances given me, and the knowledge of my own speed, I had figured on making Glendale a little after sunset, but I knew that even if detained overnight through some miscalculation, I had plenty of camping experience to fall back on. Besides, my presence at my destination was not really necessary till the following noon. It was the weather that set my plans awry. As the sun rose higher, it scorched through even the thicket of the foliage and burned up my energy at every step. By noon my clothes were soaking with perspiration, and I felt myself faltering in spite of all my resolution. As I pushed deeper into the woods, I found the trail greatly obstructed with underbrush, and at many points nearly effaced. It must have been weeks, perhaps months, since anyone had broken his way through, and I began to wonder if I could, after all, live up to my schedule. At length, having grown very hungry, I looked for the deepest patch of shade I could find, and proceeded to eat the lunch which the hotel had prepared for me. There were some indifferent sandwiches, a piece of stale pie, and a bottle of very light wine. By no means sumptuous fare, but welcome enough to one in my state of overheated exhaustion. It was too hot for smoking to be of any solace, so I did not take out my pipe. Instead, I stretched myself at full length under the trees when my meal was done, intent on stealing a few moments' rest before commencing the last lap of my journey. I suppose I was a fool to drink that wine, for light though it was, it proved just enough to finish the work. It proved just enough to finish the work the sultry, oppressive day had begun. My plan called for the merest momentary relaxation, yet with scarcely a warning yawn, I dropped off into a sound slumber. When I opened my eyes, twilight was closing in about me. A wind fanned my cheeks, restoring me quickly to full perception. And as I glanced up at the sky, I saw with apprehension that black racing clouds were leading on a solid wall of darkness prophetic of violent thunderstorm. I knew now that I could not reach Glendale before morning, but the prospect of a night in the but the prospect of a night in the woods, my first night of lone forest camping, became very repugnant under these trying conditions. In a moment I decided to push along for a while at least in the hope of finding some shelter before the tempest should break. Darkness spread over the woods like a heavy blanket. The lowering clouds grew more threatening, and the wind increased to a veritable gale. A flash of distant lightning illuminated the sky, followed by an ominous rumble that seemed to hint of malign pursuit. Then I felt a drop of rain on my outstretched hand, and though still walking on automatically, resigned myself to the inevitable. After I'm distracted at the moment. So let's try again. Another moment, and I had seen the light of a window through the trees and the darkness. Eager only for shelter, I hastened toward it. Would to God I had turned and fled. There was a sort of imperfect clearing on the farther side of which, with its back against the primeval wood, stood a building. I had expected a shanty or log cabin, but stopped short in surprise when I beheld a neat and tasteful little house of 2 stories, some 70 years old by its architecture, yet still in a state of repair betokening the closest and most civilized attention. Through the small panes one of the lower windows Through the small panes of one of the lower windows a bright light shone, and towards this, surrounded by the impact of another raindrop, I presently hurried across the clearing, rapping loudly on the doors as soon as I...
Jak mě to opravdu zabiju, jak chci spát, ty kurvo. Je 3:45 ráno.
Idioty, já vysílám živě, dívej.
Víš, je úplně jedno, to ty vysíláš nebo ne, ty
Okamžitě odejdi a stichni. Okamžitě odejdi a stichni.
Je to přijde, že
okamžitě odejdi a stichni.
Do pistku
okamžitě odejdi a stichni.
Ty kurva, ty někde...
Okamžitě odejdi a stichni.
Někde jedeš?
Okamžitě...
Skurvený?
Okamžitě odejdi a stichni.
No tak můžeš mít, jako...
So, anyone for immediately cancelling the stream and deleting all recordings of it? Because unless I find a single person here saying, actually wanting me to continue it, and saying so, I'm just going to immediately stop. I'm not flustered. I don't want the recording of this stream to include that. So I don't know what to do, because it will if I continue this stream, it will automatically include that as well. That was my mother. She came in to call me a whore. Let me see. And if I stop the stream, no one's gonna fucking come to, and then restart it, no one's gonna fucking come to the next one. Let me just go to manage videos, because if I stop now, I can't. There's places I sent a link that I'd have to wait 24 hours to send another link to. Fuck. Let me just see. Okay. Let's editor. What is that going to? Okay. I can just restart. Okay, I'll just restart the entire narration again from the beginning. And I'll just delete this entire section. So what I'm going to do, which means when I upload it, this entire intro bit's going to get deleted. So I'm going to do this so that I'm aware and can actually find it in the recording. Okay, so let's start again, because let's find the where the fuck is this? Sorry. Let's find it again. Okay, so it's take 2. We're going to be doing the ghost eater, hopefully without anyone bursting in and vulgarly insulting me and threatening me. So I'm going to just delete the entire intro section to this from the VOD if in the editor, if it lets me. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. So let's just restart this. So the Ghost Eater, a collaboration between rather a ghost-written story for CM Eddy by H.P. Lovecraft. Moon madness, a touch of fever. I wish I could think so, but when I am alone after dark in the waste places where my wanderings take me, and hear across infinite voids the demon echoes of those screams and snarls, and that detestable crunching of bones, I shudder again at the memory of that eldritch night. I knew less of woodcraft in those days, though the wilderness called just as strongly to me as it does now. Up to that night I had always been careful to employ a guide, but circumstances now suddenly forced me to a trial of my own skill. It was midsummer in Maine, and despite my great need to get from Mayfair to Glendale by the next noon, I could find no person willing to pilot me. Unless I took the long route through Potowiset, which would not bring me to my goal in time, there would be dense forests to penetrate. Yet whenever I asked for a guide, I was met with refusal and evasion. Stranger than I was, it seemed odd that everyone should have such glib excuses. There was too much important business on hand for such a sleepy village, and I knew that the natives were lying. But but they all had imperative duties, or said they had, and would do no more than assure me that the plane, and would do no more to assure me, again, but would do no more than assure me that the trail through the woods was very plain, running due north, and not in the least difficult for a vigorous young fellow. If I started while the morning was still early, they averred, I could get to Glendale by sundown and avoid a night in the open. Even then I suspected nothing. The prospects seemed good, and I resolved to try it alone, let the lazy villagers hang back as they might. Probably I would have tried it even if I had suspected, for for youth is stubborn, and from childhood I had only laughed at superstition and old wives' tales. So before the sun was high, I had started off through the trees at a swinging stride, lunch in my hand, guardian automatic in my pocket, and belt filled with crisp bills of large denominations. From the distances given me and a knowledge of my own speed, I had figured on making Glendale little after sunset, but I knew that even if detained overnight through some miscalculation, I had plenty of camping experience to fall back on. Besides, my presence at my destination was not really necessary till the following noon. It was the weather that set my plans awry. As the sun rose higher, it scorched through even the thickest of foliage and burned up my energy at every step. By noon my clothes were soaking with perspiration, and I felt myself faltering in spite of all my resolution. As I pushed deeper into the woods, I found the trail greatly obstructed with underbrush, and at many points nearly effaced. It must have been weeks, perhaps months, since anyone had broken his way through, and I began to wonder if I could, after all, live up to my schedule. At length, having grown very hungry, I looked for the deepest patch of shade I could find, and proceeded to eat the lunch which the hotel had prepared for me. There were some indifferent sandwiches, a piece of stale pie, and a bottle of very light wine, by no means sumptuous fare, but welcome enough to one in my state of overheated exhaustion. It was too hot for smoking to be of any solace, so I did not take out my pipe. Instead, I stretched myself at full length under the trees when my meal was done, intent on stealing a few moments' rest before commencing the last lap of my journey. I suppose I was a fool to drink that wine, for light though it was, it proved just enough to finish the work the sultry oppressive day had begun. My plan had called for the merest momentary relaxation, yet with scarcely a warning yawn I dropped off into a sound slumber. When I opened my eyes, twilight was closing in about me. A wind fanned my cheeks, restoring me quickly to full perception, and as I glanced up at the sky, I saw with apprehension that black racing clouds were leading on a solid wall of darkness, prophetic of violent thunderstorm. I knew now that I could not reach Glendale before morning, but the prospect of a night in the woods, my first night of lone forest camping, became very repugnant under these trying conditions. In a moment I decided to push along for a while at least, in the hope of finding some shelter before the tempest should break. Darkness spread over the woods like a heavy blanket. The lowering clouds grew more threatening, and the wind increased to a veritable gale. A flash of distant lightning illuminated the sky, followed by an ominous rumble that seemed to hint of malign pursuit. Then I felt a drop of rain on my outstretched hand, and though still walking on automatically, resigned myself to the inevitable. Another moment, and I had seen the light of a window through the trees and the darkness. Eager only for shelter, I hastened toward it. Would to God I had turned and fled. There was a sort of imperfect clearing on the farther side of which, with its back against the primeval wood, stood a building. I had expected a shanty or log cabin, but stopped short in surprise when I beheld a neat and tasteful little house of 2 stories, some 70 years old by its architecture. Yet still in a state of repair, betokening the...
A kurva dost, 1 hodina ráno. Já chci spát. Já ti říkám, že tě mám plnou prdel, ty hovado jednodenní.
Takže ty teď to budeš opět znovu restartovat od začátku, takže každá toto tvoje přerušení akorát prodlužuje dobu, po kterou to budu dělat.
Okay then, let's start this for the third time now. So once again, ending this, waiting a few seconds, so that all of this can be erased from history forever, and I get to start reading this for the 3rd time in a row. So, attempt number 3. The Ghost Eater by C.M. Eddy. And I'm sorry for anyone who's listening, but you'll have to bear with hearing the introduction to this story a 3rd time, and I'm not apologizing, actually. You have to bear it. And if you don't want to, I implore you to keep the video playing while plugging your ears or leaving the room. I don't really care which one of those you do. I'm sorry. Moon madness. A touch of fever. I wish I could think so. But when I am alone after dark in the waste places where my wanderings take me, and hear across infinite voids the demon echoes of those screams and snarls, and that detestable crunching of bones, I shudder again at the memory of that eldritch night. I knew less of woodcraft in those days, or the wilderness called just as strongly to me as it does now. Up to that night I'd always been careful to employ a guide, but circumstances now suddenly forced me to a trial of my own skill. It was midsummer in Maine, and despite my great need to get from Mayfair to Glendale by the next noon, I could find no person willing to pilot me. Unless I took the long route through Pottawisset, which would not bring me to my goal in time, there would be dense forests to penetrate. Yet whenever I asked for a guide, I was met with refusal and evasion. Stranger than I was, it seemed odd that everyone should have such glib excuses. There was too much important business on hand for such a sleepy village, and I knew that the natives were lying. But they had all imperative duties, or said that they had, and would do no more than assure me that the trail through the woods was very plain, running due north, and not in the least difficult for a vigorous young fellow. If I started while the morning was still early, they averred I could get to Glendale by sundown, and avoid a night in the open. Even then I suspected nothing. The prospect seemed good, and I resolved to try it alone, let the lazy villagers hang back as they might. Probably I would have tried it even if I had suspected, for youth is stubborn, and from childhood I had only laughed at superstition and old wives' tales. So before the sun was high, I had started off through the trees at a swinging stride, lunch in my hand, Guardian automatic in my pocket, and belt filled with crisp bills of large denominations. From the distances given me and a knowledge of my own speed, I had figured on making Glendale little after sunset, but I knew that even if detained overnight through some miscalculation, I had plenty of camping experience to fall back on. Besides, my presence at my destination was not really necessary till the following noon. It was the weather that set my plans awry. As the sun rose higher, it scorched through even the thickest of foliage, and burned up my energy at every step. By noon my clothes were soaking with perspiration, and I felt myself faltering in spite of all my resolution. As I pushed deeper into the woods, I found the trail greatly obstructed with underbrush, and at many points nearly effaced. It must have been weeks, perhaps months, since anyone had broken his way through, and I began to wonder if I could, after all, live up to my schedule. At length, having grown very hungry, I looked for the deepest patch of shade I could find, and proceeded to eat the lunch which the hotel had prepared for me. There were some indifferent sandwiches, a piece of stale pie, and a bottle of very light wine, by no means sumptuous fare, but welcome enough to one in my state of overheated exhaustion. It was too hot for smoking to be of any solace, so I did not take out my pipe. Instead, I stretched myself at full length under the trees when my meal was done, intent on stealing a few moments' rest before commencing the last lap of my journey. I suppose I was a fool to drink that wine, for light though it was, it proved just enough to finish the sultry oppressive day had begun. My plan called for the merest momentary relaxation, yet with scarcely a warning yawn, I dropped off into a sound slumber. When I opened my eyes, twilight was closing in about me. The wind fanned my cheeks, restoring me quickly to full perception, and as I glanced up at the sky, I saw with apprehension that black racing clouds were leading on a solid wall of darkness, prophetic of violent thunderstorm. I knew now that I could not reach Glendale before morning, but the prospect of a night in the woods, my first night of lone forest camping, became very repugnant under these trying conditions. In a moment I decided to push along In a moment I decided to push along for a while at least, in the hope of finding some shelter before the tempest should break. Darkness spread over the woods like a heavy blanket. The lowering clouds grew more threatening, and the wind increased to a veritable gale. A flash of distant lightning illuminated the sky, followed by an ominous rumble that seemed to hint of malign pursuit. Then I felt a drop of rain on my outstretched hand, and though still walking on automatically, resigned myself to the inevitable. Another moment, and I had seen the light of a window through the trees and the darkness. Eager only for shelter, I hastened toward it. Would to God I had turned and fled. There was a sort of imperfect clearing on the farther side of which, with its back against the primeval woods, stood a building. I had expected a shanty or log cabin, but stopped short in surprise when I beheld a neat and tasteful little house of 2 stories, some 70 years old by its architecture, yet still in a state of repair betokening the closest and most civilized attention. Through the small panes of one of the lower windows a bright light shone, and toward this, spurred by the impact of another raindrop, I presently hurried across the clearing, rapping loudly on the doors as soon as I gained the steps. With startling promptness my knocking was answered by a deep, pleasant voice which uttered the single syllable, "Come." Pushing open the unlocked door, I entered a shadowy hall, lighted by an open doorway at the right, beyond which was a book-lined room with a gleaming window. As I closed the outer door behind me, I could not help noticing a peculiar odor about the house. A faint, elusive, scarcely definable odor which somehow suggested animals. My host, I surmised, must be a hunter or trapper, with his business conducted on the premises. The man who had spoken sat in a capacious easy-chair beside a marble-topped centre table, a long lounging robe of grey swathing his lean form. The light from a powerful argand lamp threw his features into prominence, and as he eyed me curiously, I studied him in no less detail. He was strikingly handsome, with thin, clean-shaven face, glossy flaxen hair, neatly brushed, long, irregular eyebrows that met in a slanting angle above the nose, shapely ears set low and well back on the head, and large, expressive grey eyes almost luminous in their animation. When he smiled a welcome, he showed a magnificently even set of firm white teeth, and as he waved me to a chair, I was struck by the fineness of his slender hands, with their long, tapering fingers whose ruddy almond-shaped nails were slightly curved and exquisitely manicured. I could not help wondering why a man of such engaging personality should choose the life of a recluse. "Sorry to intrude," I ventured, "but I've given up the hope of making Glendale before morning, and there's a storm coming on which sent me looking for cover." As if to corroborate my words, there came at this point a vivid flash, a crashing reverberation, and the first breaking of a torrential downpour that beat maniacally against the windows. My host seemed oblivious to the elements, and flashed me another smile when he answered. His voice was soothing and well modulated, and his eyes held a calmness almost hypnotic. "You're welcome to whatever hospitality I can offer, but I'm afraid it won't be much. I've a game leg, so you'll have to do most of the waiting on yourself. If you're hungry, you'll find plenty in the kitchen, plenty of food, if not of ceremony." It seemed to me that I could detect the slightest trace of a foreign accent in his tone, though his language was fluently correct and idiomatic. Rising to an impressive height, he headed for the door with long, limping steps, and I noticed the huge, hairy arms that hung at his side, in such curious contrast with his delicate hands. "Come," he suggested, "bring the lamp along with you. I might as well sit in the kitchen as here." I followed him into the hall and the room across it, and at his direction ransacked the wood pile in the corner and the cupboard on the wall. A few moments later, when the fire was going nicely, I asked him if I might not prepare food for both, but he courteously declined. "It's too hot to eat," he told me. "Besides, I had a bite before you came." After washing the dishes left from my lone meal, I sat down for a while smoking my pipe contentedly. My host asked me a few questions about the neighbouring villages, but lapsed into sullen taciturnity when he learned I was an outsider. As he brooded there, I could not help feeling a quality of strangeness in him, some subtle alienage that could hardly be analysed. I was quite certain, for one thing, that he was tolerating me because of the storm rather than welcoming me with genuine hospitality. As for the storm, it seemed almost to have spent itself. Outside it was already growing lighter, for there was a full moon behind the clouds, and the rain had dwindled to a trivial drizzle. Perhaps, I thought, I could now resume my journey after all, an idea which I suggested to my host. "Better wait till morning," he remarked. You say you're afoot, and it's a good 3 hours to Glendale. I've 2 bedrooms upstairs, and you're welcome to one of them if you care to stay." There was a sincerity in his invitation which dispelled any doubts I'd held regarding his hospitality, and I now concluded that his silences must be the result of long isolation from his fellows in this wilderness. After sitting without a word through 3 fillings of my pipe, I finally began to yawn. "It's been rather a strenuous day for me," I admitted, "and I guess I'd better be making tracks for bed. I want to be up at sunrise, and on my way." My host waved his arm toward the door through which I could see the hall and the staircase. "Take the lamp with you," he instructed. "It's the only one I have, but I don't mind sitting in the dark, really. Half the time I don't light it at all when I'm alone. Oil is so hard to get out here, and I go to the village so seldom. Your room is the one on the right, at the head of the stairs." Taking the lamp and turning in the hall to say good night, I could see his eyes glowing almost phosphorescently in the darkened room I had left, and I was half reminded for a moment of the jungle and the circle of eyes that sometimes glow just beyond the radius of the campfire. Then I started upstairs. As I reached the second floor, I could hear my host limping across the hall to the other room below, and perceived that he moved with owlish sureness despite the darkness. Truly, he had but little need of the lamp. The storm was over, and as I entered the room assigned me, I found it bright with the rays of a full moon that streamed on the bed from an uncurtained south window. Blowing out the lamp and leaving the house in darkness but for the moonbeams, I sniffed at the pungent odour that rose above the scent of the kerosene, the quasi-animal odour I had noticed on first entering the place. I crossed to the window and threw it wide, breathing deep of the cool, fresh night air. When I started to undress, I paused almost instantly, recalling my money belt still in its place about my waist. Possibly, I reflected, it would be well not to be too hasty or unguarded, for I had read of men who seized just such an opportunity to rob and even to murder the stranger within their dwelling, so arranging the bedclothes to look as if they had so arranging the bedclothes to look as if they covered a sleeping figure. I drew the room's only chair into the concealing shadows, filled and lighted my pipe again, and sat down to rest or watch as the occasion might demand. I could not have been sitting there long when my sensitive ears caught the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs. All the old lore of robber landlords rushed on me afresh, when another moment revealed that the steps were plain, loud, and careless, with no attempt at concealment, while my host's tread, as I had heard it from the head of the staircase, was a soft, limping stride. Shaking the ashes from my pipe, I slipped it in my pocket. Then seizing and drawing my automatic, I rose from the chair, tiptoed across the room, and crouched tensely in a spot where which the opening door would cover. The door opened, and into the shaft of moonlight stepped a man I had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, and distinguished, his face half hidden by a heavy square-cut beard, and his neck buried in a high black stock of a pattern long obsolete in America. He was indubitably a foreigner. How he could have entered the house without my knowledge was quite beyond me. Nor could I believe for an instant that he had been concealed in either of the two rooms or the hall below me. As I gazed intently at him in the insidious moonbeams, it seemed to me that I could see directly through his sturdy form. But perhaps this was only an illusion that came from my shock of surprise. Noticing the disarray of the bed, but evidently missing the intended effect of occupancy, the stranger muttered something to himself in a foreign tongue and proceeded to disrobe. Flinging his clothes into the chair I had vacated, he crept into bed, pulled the covers over him, and in a moment or two was breathing with the regular respiration of a sound sleeper. My first thought was to seek out my host and demand an explanation, but a second later I deemed it better to make sure that the whole incident was not a mere delusive after-effect of my wine-drugged sleep in the woods. I still felt weak and faint, and despite my recent supper was as hungry as if I had not eaten since the noonday lunch. Sorry, I just lost my place for a second. I crossed to the bed, reached out and grasped at the shoulder of the sleeping man. Then, barely checking a cry of mad fright and dizzy astonishment, I fell back with pounding pulses and dilated eyes, for my clutching fingers had passed directly through the sleeping form and seized only the sheet below. A complete analysis of my jarred and jumbled sensation would be futile. The man was intangible, yet I could still see him there, hear his regular breathing, and watch his figure as it half turned beneath the clothes. And then, as I was quite certain of my own madness or hypnosis, I heard other footsteps on the stairs, soft, padded, dog-like, limping footsteps pattering up, up, up. And again, that pungent animal smell, this time in redoubled volume. Dazed and dream-drowsed, I crept once more behind the protecting open door, shaken to the marrow, but now resigned to any fate known or nameless. Then into that shaft of eerie moonlight stepped the gaunt form of a great grey wolf. Limped, I should have said, for one hind foot was held in the air, as though wounded by some stray shot. The beast turned its head in my direction, and as it did so, the pistol dropped from my twitching fingers and clattered unheeded to the floor. The ascending succession of horrors was fast paralyzing my will and consciousness, for the eyes that now glared toward me from that hellish head were the grey phosphorescent eyes of my host, as they had peered at me through the darkness of the kitchen. Really, who could have guessed? I do not yet know whether it saw me. The eyes turned from my direction to the bed and gazed gluttonously on the spectral sleeping form there. Then the head tilted back, and from that demon throat came the most shocking I hate this word, ululation I have ever heard, a thick, nauseous, lupine hole that made my heart stand still. The form on the bed stirred, opened his eyes, and shrank from what he saw. The animal crouched quiveringly, and then, as the ethereal figure uttered a shriek of mortal human anguish and terror that no ghost of legend could counterfeit, sprang straight for its victim's throat, its white, firm, even teeth flashing in the moonlight as they closed on the jugular vein of the screaming phantasm. The scream ended in a blood-choked gurgle, and the frightened human eyes turned glassy. That scream had roused me to action, and in a second I had retrieved my automatic and emptied its entire contents into the wolfish monstrosity before me. But I heard the unhindered thud of each bullet as it embedded itself in the opposite wall. My nerves gave way. Blind fear hurled me toward the door, and blind fear prompted the one backward glance in which I saw that the wolf had sunk its teeth into the body of its quarry. Then came that culminating sensory impression and the devastating thought to which it gave birth. This was the same body I had thrust my hand through a few moments before, and yet as I plunged down that black nightmare staircase, I could hear the crunching of bones. How I found the trail to Glendale, or how I managed to traverse it, I suppose I shall never know. I only know that sunrise found me on the hill at the edge of the woods, with the steepled village outspread below me, and the blue thread of the Cataqua sparkling in the distance. Hatless, coatless, ashen-faced, and as soaked with perspiration as if I had spent the night abroad in the storm, I hesitated to enter the village till I had recovered at least some outward semblance of composure. At last I picked my way down the hill and through the narrow streets with their flagstone sidewalks and colonial doorways till I reached the Lafayette house, whose proprietor eyed me askance. "Where from so early, son, and why the wild look? I've just come through the woods from Mayfair." "You came through the Devil's Woods last night and alone?" The old man stared, with a queer look of alternate horror and incredulity. "Why not?" I encountered. "I couldn't have made it in time through Pottawisset, and I had to be here not later than this noon. And last night was full moon, my God." He eyed me curiously. "See anything of Vasily Okranikov or the Count? Say, do I look that simple? What are you trying to do, jolly me?" But his tone was as grave as a priest's as he replied, "You must be new to these parts, sonny. If you weren't, you'd know all about Devil's Woods and the full moon, Vasily and the rest." I felt anything but flippant, yet knew I must not seem serious after my earlier remarks. "Go on. I know you're dying to tell me. I'm like a donkey all ears." Then he told the legend in his dry way, stripping it of vitality and convincingness through lack of colouring, detail, and atmosphere. But for me it needed no vitality or convincingness that any poet could have given. Remember what I had witnessed, and remember that I had never heard of the tale until after I had the experience and fled from the terror of those crunched phantom bones. There used to be quite a few Russians scattered betwixt here and Mayfair. They came after one of their nihilist troubles back in Russia. Vasily Okranikov was one of them, a tall, thin, handsome chap with shiny yellow hair and a wonderful manner. They said, though, that he was a servant of the devil, a werewolf and eater of men. He built him a house in the woods about a third of the way from here to Mayfair and lived all alone. Every once in a while a traveller would come out of the woods with some pretty strange tale about being chased by a big grey wolf with shining human eyes like Okranikov's. One night somebody took a pot shot at the wolf, and the next time the Russian came to Glendale he walked with a limp. That settled it. There wasn't any mere suspicion now, but hard facts. Then he sent to Mayfair for the Count. His name was Fyodor Chernevsky, and he had bought the old and he had bought the old gambrel roof Fowler place up State Street to come and see him. They all warned the Count, for he was a fine man and a splendid neighbour, but he said he could take care of himself all right. It was the night of the full moon. He was brave as they make him, and all he did was to tell some men he had around the place to follow him to Vasily's if he didn't show up in decent time. They did. And you tell me, Sonny, that you've been through those woods at night? Sure, I tell you. I tried to appear nonchalant. I'm no count, and here I am to tell the tale. But what did the men find at Okranikov's house? They found the Count's mangled body, Sonny, and a gaunt grey wolf hovering over it with blood-slavering jaws. You can guess who the wolf was, and folks do say that every full moon. But Sonny, didn't you see or hear anything? Not a thing, Pop. And say, what became of the wolf, or Vasily Okranikov? Why, son, they killed it, filled it full of lead and buried it in the house and then burned the place down. You know all this was 60 years ago when I was a little shaver, but I remember it as it was yesterday. I turned away with a shrug of my shoulders. It was all so quaint and silly and artificial in the full light of day. But sometimes, when I am alone after dark in waste places and hear the demon echoes of those screams and snarls and that detestable crunching of bones, I shudder again at the memory of that eldritch night. So, that is The Ghost Eater by Lovecraft and by Lovecraft and to some extent by C.M. Eddy. Now, I'm actually wondering if... why did I open this? Oh yeah, this is the second thing. I opened it just to see how long this is. Actually, we may be able, to read this next one, and I'm just going to flash it on screen for a brief moment. I could leave this on here because I have this open twice, actually. So, let's see here. I can actually go and close this because we've already finished reading that. And it's The Thing, a 5-minute tale of supernatural adventure by Frank Marion Palmer. Absolutely no idea who that is. So it is easy to recall, bit by bit, just as it occurred, though it should have been forgotten long ago. I can even now visualize the thing as I saw it in all its frightfulness. Time had accentuated the memory of that haunting half-hour. The immediate result of my enervating experience was a benumbing of the senses, a partial paralysis of the mind. The frenzied fear, the gripping horror of it, came to me later, when miles away from the scene of its occurrence. I had retired late. My room number, 307, was on the 3rd floor of a downtown hotel, which town and which hotel for good and sufficient reasons I shall not say. Several cups of strong coffee had rendered sleep out of the question. The weather was warm, but a damp, sticky, smoke-laden liaise, due to the crowded shipping that lay in the harbour below, penetrated everywhere. I fancied the night was dark, but the electric glare of the city turned night into day. At last, lulled by the stillness within and the hum of the city which came to me through my open window, I slept. My sleep was a dreamless, leaden unconsciousness far from refreshing. Then came the introduction to my unusual experience. I could never explain why I heard it so distinctly. Soundly asleep, my ears were painfully smitten by a dull, heavy, sickening, smothered explosion. I was aware and alert in an instant, trying to account for it. light of day was paling the electric glare, and objects were plainly visible within the room. Without my open door, I could see through the Without my door, I could see through the blue murk the outlines of buildings across the street, the serrated skyline far above. I got up, stretched and yawned, took a turn round the room, lit a cigarette, and lay down again. I had not accounted for the noise, but finally concluded that it came from some natural cause, apparently out on the street. At any rate, I thought no more of it as I lay there enjoying my morning smoke. I was about to doze again when the room was suddenly filled, saturated with the vilest smell of burned powder I have ever encountered. It was absolutely sickening and seemed mingled with the smell of burning human flesh, the stench that hangs over a battlefield the morning after a carnage. Thank you. I'm just seeing your message now, Lost Horizons. I actually wonder if you're actually know about the channel or previously, like, or on the channel server, you've heard about it run across it from somewhere else on some other server I hadn't advertised a stream on. I would actually be interested to know how you came across this stream, because I don't remember seeing you in the comments before. But I'm going to continue reading in the meantime, so sorry. There we go. So I said to myself that explosion was in this building on the third floor and not far from my room. I was still reclining and had taken another cigarette when the thing came into my room, putting an end to all thought of immediate investigation. It came in through the wide open window from the fire escape. Its shape was that of a human body, entirely nude, perfectly distinct in outline and detail, yet lacking in the extremities. A torso only, so distinct and lifelike that I could see the folds of flesh, the contour of muscles, the pinky yellow colour of the skin, and yet so transparent was it. The window casing, the figured wallpaper, the outlines of the dresser, and everything it passed were visible through it, as plainly discernible as though it were not there. It floated in slowly, as a mist of early morning might enter one's casement, or a wisp of smoke wafted in on a stray breeze, unsubstantial, filmy, yet seeming to have the substance of flesh and blood. The head of my bed was exactly opposite the window, and I had splendid vantage for contemplation. I was not long in discovering the incompleteness of that spectral visitor. It lacked hands and forearms, the lower extremities were cut off above the knees, and to complete the phantasmal horror of it, there was no head upon those broad, powerful shoulders, only the stump of a muscular neck. The awfulness of this armless, legless, headless shape was further intensified by the fact that the extremity of each truncated member seemed to drip red blood. All this I saw as it floated into my room through the open window, a ghastly shape that defied description, while I was breathing the stench of a day-old battlefield. And now the most weird detail of all, the most inexplicable, the one that indeed filled me with astonishment, was yet to come. Between my open window and the door, against the wall, stood a dresser surmounted by a large plate-glass mirror. As the thing advanced, floated through my room to melt, vanish, or draw through the solid panels of my door, it, perforce, must pass by this mirror. So clear was my mind in those trying moments that I had dwelt upon this very fact as the thing advanced, and had speculated as to what the reflection of a spectre would be like. Well, thanks, and yeah. Thanks for popping in. I will actually go and sorry for the fan. I'll try and sanitize the board to remove the unpleasant interruptions we've had before. So, maybe you can stop. Maybe you could stop doing this for the moment. Okay. There we go. Let science explain this singular phenomenon. I cannot. The reflection of my spectre was no spectre at all. It was the solid, substantial flesh, blood, and bone of a 6-foot man, about 30 years of age, not lacking a single member, perfect in colour, form, feature, as nude as the day he was born, gracefully floating by the big looking-glass. His eyes closed, a contented smile lighting up his handsome features, much like one asleep whose face is transfigured by a pleasant dream. And then, just as the figure was floating free of the glass, as the bevel on the edge of the plate began to distort the otherwise perfect lineaments, the head was turned by some odd movement of the body, the eyes opened and looked straight into mine. With a start, I half arose and called out, "Arnold, oh Arnold, can it be?" Even as I called, foolishly, idiotically, pleadingly, in a hollow, unnatural voice, I knew there could be no response. For an instant, fear that he might heed my cry, that he might delay his noiseless flight through my room, gripped my throat and stilled my voice. But now the apparition out of the glass was at the door. Through it I could plainly see the outline of the door casings, and it was becoming less and less. It was gone. The phantom drew through the locked and bolted door as vapour through the meshes of a sieve. Such was the thing that visited. Sorry, I hate saying this word. Such was the thing that visited me in my room on the morning of September 2nd. As soon as it was gone, my feet touched the floor. I unlocked the door and went into the hall. All was quiet out there. I heard no sound, smelled no burning powder. If there were guests in the outer rooms, they all must have been sound asleep. One could have heard a mouse creep in that gloomy hallway. I closed the door and got into bed. When I woke again, the clanging jar of the street traffic told me it was late. I bathed, shaved, and dressed. As I walked down the hall and took the elevator to the office, I scanned the faces of the later risers. There was no look of surprise, curiosity, consternation on a single set of features. All was commonplace as upon any other morning. Nothing unusual had happened. And such was the effect of those passing and repassing guests that my harrowing experience of the early morning began to seem unreal and all but passed for the time out of my memory. At the office I paid my bill, listened to the commonplace talk of a garrulous clerk, and went away without having mentioned a word of my experience. On the stage, homeward bound, a chat with a seatmate and the beauty of autumn foliage painting the borders of the highway red, brown, and yellow occupied my attention. But when I arrived at Maple Shadows, I was silent no longer. I horrified my wife and daughters until they ran away from me. Then I followed them up. "But Arnold Matthews was killed at Chateau Thierry. You told me so," said my daughter. "He was. I saw him killed with my own eyes. His legs, arms, and head blown into bits by an exploding bomb dropped from the air. Not a shred of his clothing remained. And this one, do go away. You make me shudder. Oh, Dad, how awful. From the sheer lack of an audience, I desisted. Watch the papers tonight and tomorrow, I ventured again at the dinner table. A man committed suicide this morning at the Savoy Hotel. How he did it I am not quite prepared to say, but I should think that, owing to the character of the explosion and the appearance of the thing after. My wife stopped me with a gesture of disgust. "George, that is not a nice subject for the dinner table." "Well," I reiterated, unwilling to be squelched so suddenly, "he killed himself just the same in a room across the hall from mine. You'll see. Watch the papers." And this is what we read in the evening paper. "Suicide at Savoy Hotel. Arnold Matthews, a guest at the Savoy Hotel occupying room 308, committed suicide last night or early this morning. About the middle of the afternoon, when it was found that the man would not respond to repeated knocking and that the door was locked from the inside, the room was broken into. A gruesome sight met the eyes of the landlord, clerks, and officers of the law. On the bed, in a sitting position, braced against the floorboard and swathed in all the blankets the room contained, was found the dead body of Matthews. Thorough examination of the mutilated body, together with bits of evidence found on the bed and elsewhere in the room, led those present to believe that the deceased had attached a piece of fuse to a large dynamite cap, placed the cap in his mouth, raised his feet and legs from the floor, then covering himself completely with blankets, sheets, pillows, and his own clothing, the man was entirely naked, lighted the fuse and, deliberately folding his arms, calmly awaited the end. The bed, floor, walls, and ceiling were bespattered with blood. The body was a ghastly sight. Nothing but the trunk was left to indicate that the remains had once been a human being. Arnold Matthews was about 28 years of age, 6 feet in height, light complexion, brown hair and eyes. He was a stranger in the city, and an effort is being made to locate some friend or relative. The motive is still unknown. No one has yet been found who heard the sound of the explosion. This is not strange, as the entire third floor, with the exception of 2 rooms, Matthew's room and one opposite, was unoccupied. The officers are trying to locate one G.R. Lawton, an ex-army surgeon, the man who slept in number 307, the room opposite the one occupied by Arnold Matthews last night. That's the end of that one. I'm a bit confused by the framing, specifically. So this was the same person, but wait, so this was the same person who the narrator said he saw die like years before it, apparently that different moment, like at a different place, presumably in the war, in a war of some kind. But here he is, the exact same man with the exact same name, blowing himself up while swaddling himself in a mountain of blankets at the same time. I'm really confused by the I'm confused by the twist there. That's a bit odd, but never mind that. So yeah, I believe that these 2 are going to do it for tonight. I'm sorry I have to end earlier than I thought, but we had a couple of false starts, and would have basically, and I wanted to start earlier as well, so right now this is all I can do. So I'm just going to end this right here, and also in hope of avoiding yet another unpleasant interruption, and hope to be able to make another one soon to read the other things I've had planned for a bit. So yeah, thanks for coming, and yeah, if you want to help support the show, like helping me be able to currently pay for basic things like grocery bills and stuff, while I'm having to deal with family at the moment, unwillingly and temporarily, hopefully, dealing with some medical issues that I have to unwillingly help my father with. It's a whole thing, and my mother's also involved, and she's crazy, so that's another entire thing to deal with. Basically, yeah, I'm trying to it's a bit complicated. I'm not going to go into all that now. Still have other things that I'm doing as well. I'm not sure for how long I'm going to be staying here, and hopefully for not that long. Anyway, yeah, so we have I'll just very quickly open this. I need to find the thing that I was usually sending, that we also need for the purposes of what is it? Seriously, where did I put it? Where was that last one before then? Okay. So I'm looking for something to put a link to put in the description. Okay, so yes, if you want to help us deal with some of these things, even just a minor, completely voluntary donation, and help me get out of this and not have to deal with these people anymore, we have a direct PayPal link, and I'm going to just randomly put in the channel now. And we have a link for a GoFundMe to try and help me to get out of here. You know, which I'm just going to have to copy the entire thing. Okay, because it like doesn't actually let me do anything with this. So copy link. I don't, and I'll just put that there. Sorry for taking that long. And yeah, so I'll be seeing you hopefully in a couple of days at the latest. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming in and watching the VOD. Watching the stream. The VOD is going to be slightly shorter because I'm going to remove the unpleasant bits in the editor. So yeah, that's why the re-upload is not going to include that. Well, it might temporarily, but I'm going to try to edit it out of the full version when in the editor when it's actually finished rendering. So yeah. Oh, we just had 2 new people come in. Okay, let me see. Maybe we can actually just very quickly do something else as well. I'm just going to go through here. That's the house in the forest. That was a bit long. Maybe we'll have something here we could do. How many pages is this? That's a bit long. That's a bit long for the present. What about this one? Will you load already? Let's see, how many pages is this? It's like 4 pages. I'm a little worried because, well, I'd rather leave that for the next time because I'm worried that, you know, any moment now we're going to have an unpleasant intrusion again. So I'd really rather just cut this here to have less of a hard time editing this down later to be rewatchable without giving all of you trauma as well. So thanks for coming to the stream, and I'll see you later then. Bye.